game system has a sound chip, and that's what makes the sound. So when the programmer sits there and mouse clicks and puts in, he's actually, you know, basically talking to that sound chip and telling it what to do. Say, okay, play this note for this length, and then play this note for this length, kind of thing. And so, so it's a note on, note off. You know, where the position of the note is, the note value, and then how hard you push it down, which gives it the velocity, and the length, you know, the length that you hold the note down for. That was basically the information. And there's this new thing that was, you know, relatively new that had just come out called MIDI, which is where you take your musical keyboard and you can, you know, hook it up to other keyboards at the time, and you could control like all the different sounds at once. But all of the information was the note value, how long you held on to it, and the position and the velocity and everything. And I said, well, look, all those things that you're programming into that chip, I can actually do through my keyboard, my MIDI keyboard. So can you build me something that takes my keyboard and lets it talk to that chip, so that I can basically play on my keyboard what the sound chip is. And so they built me this thing. And so I was able to play on a piano keyboard. I was able to play and hear the sounds that were coming out. And then I would take another MIDI cable and record it to what's called a sequencer, which hooks up to another computer, and it's actually recording all of the notes and the data that I'm putting. It's actually recording it, recording all of that data onto a MIDI sequencer. And they were the first generations of MIDI sequencers, like for DOS and stuff. And so I would then take that, I would play whatever I wanted to play, edit it, and then I would take that MIDI data and hand that over to a programmer, and he would translate it into this ASCII file, and then it would come back, you know, on my screen and as a bunch of zeros and ones, and I'd sit there and just like tweak it to, you know, I have to try to figure out which note was what, and it was a nightmare, but it was pretty cool because I was making sounds out of these systems that kind of no one had ever done before or heard before, which is really cool. So I had a completely unfair advantage over everybody. It was great. And so, so anyway, that's how I kind of started in the game industry. And then in the early 90s, when the Sega CD came out, if you remember that, and the CD-ROM was hitting for the PC, I worked on a game called The Seventh Guest, if everyone remembers that one. Yeah, Seventh Guest. It was really ahead of its time, and it was kind of like the precursor to Myst. You know, like Myst was a big selling game. The Seventh Guest was actually doing it before Myst did. And I was doing a lot of the sound design and things for that. I didn't do the music, but the sound effects. And so CD-ROMs were coming out, and then the Sega CD came out around the same time. This is like 1993. And so that's when CD-ROMs became available as a storage medium. I was now able to record real music onto a disc, and you could actually take those old discs out and put them in CD players, and they would play the music. And so one of the first Sega CD games I worked on was a game called The Terminator for the movie, and yay, 2 people played it. And so what I wanted to do is, now that I had the capability, I didn't have any restraints to the cartridges and the sounds that the machines made. I started recording live guitars and drums and live bass. In fact, The Terminator on the Sega CD, which came out in 93 or 94, was the very first video game to ever have a guitar in it, a live guitar and drums. And so I'm doing all this like rock music and stuff like that. I'm a big Van Halen fan, and Aerosmith, and Pink Floyd, and Led Zeppelin. So I was doing all this kind of, you know, rock stuff. And I remember the producer of the game came into my office, and I was all really happy and proud and stuff. I'm like, yeah, check this out. And he's like, what the hell is this? It's like, this isn't video game music. I'm like, exactly. And for the record though, I mean, some of the greatest video game music ever of our generation was written for bleeps and bloops. I mean, you know, the difference back then is when you only had 45 seconds of 4 voices, you know, polyphony to make sound, the shit better be good, you know? Like your limitations, it better have a good melody line. And so, you know, some of the greatest music written, Mario, Zelda, Metroid, Castlevania, Tetris, Sonic the Hedgehog, you know, all those great games, it was all about the melody because that's all we had back then, you know? But anyway, so they were, you know, people started hearing real music to video games, and the guy freaked out. I'll be honest with you, the producer was like, this doesn't match the game. This isn't video game music. I'm like, well, what the hell do you want me to do? Do you want me to like take, you know, live guitars and go, you know, dee, 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 you know, let's get some real music going here. And so we got into a big argument, and we finally took it to the president of Virgin, president of the company, and we played him the music. I said, we'll let him decide. And he listened to it, he's like, shit sounds good to me. And I stuck out my tongue and left. So, and well, actually, the Terminator actually won an award that year as well, so I really got that stick in his face. But anyway. And so I was always a big believer of, you know, putting real music and real sounds, but never forgetting that melody is the most important thing. And I think that speaks volumes for anything. I always start with a melody first. I don't necessarily look at the level and say, oh, we're in a jungle, so we have to have the jungle beats. You know, like so many people I think make that mistake. For me, I always think in regards to what the emotion is on screen. You know, am I chasing somebody or is somebody chasing me? Am I afraid or am I, is it mysterious? Am I looking for a key? Am I looking for a door? You know, I want to know what the emotion, am I happy? Am I sad? Am I pissed? Am I, you know, that's what I take away. That's what I start with. And then I go right for a melody, but I try to create a melody first, or a motif is another name for it. Because once you have that motif, once you have that melody, you can really create all those different emotions from like one thing. So I'll give you a perfect example, the music to Halo, right? That motif, oh, everybody knows it, right? But you can do so many things now that you have that melody. You know, you can make it happy, you can make it sad, you can make it fast, you can make it slow, you can make it mysterious, you can make it, you know, haunting, you can make it aggressive, you can make it, you know, all these different things. So depending on what instruments you play, how you arrange the music, how you orchestrate the music, how it's played, you know, all these different methods. So to me, always melody. Mario's another perfect example, right? Once you got that Mario melody, man, you know, Koji's been living off that for almost 30 years now, right? That's some good shit too, you know? I always say too, like that's like in 100 years from now, people are still gonna be humming the Mario music, am I right? Yes. You know, that's like, you know, I mean, think about that. There's like all this shit music that's out now. See if anyone remembers it 100 years from now, right? But they'll be humming Mario, and they'll be humming the theme from Star Wars too, I'm sure. And I mean, this is like our classic. This is our Beethoven. You know, this is our Mozart. 300 years later, people are still humming. You know, or 200 years later, people are still humming Mozart and Beethoven and stuff like that. So, you know, that's some serious cool stuff. So. And then that's our music, you know, we all grew up on that. So it's very cool to think about it in those regards. But